My ex-husband helped document my mental breakdown, while the monster targeting our son had a key to our house. I lost custody for 48 hours. Now he's sobbing in court, begging me to forgive him for what he let happen. My son was in 2nd grade when his old teacher, Mr. Doyle, came back after being investigated for touching students. The findings were inconclusive, but nobody cared, and the entire parents' board united against Mr. Doyle immediately. The janitor, Vic, was the loudest voice among us. Ethan would tell me that every single day at dismissal, Vic would position himself by the pickup line telling anyone who'd listen that it was disgusting they let that man near children again. I'm keeping my eye on him, he'd announced to groups of nodding parents. This is where it got weird though. I was worried about Mr. Doyle, so I told Ethan to always be on the lookout for him. And that's when Ethan saw something. He told me that Mr. Doyle always kept his distance from the kids in class. He never volunteered for yard duty, but the main thing he did was keep an eye on Vic. He'd follow Vic out of the classroom, always wanted to privately talk to him, always seemed to engage with him way more than he should for how much Vic seemingly hated him. Then came the day that changed everything. Ethan burst through our front door crying harder than I'd ever seen. He ran straight into my arms and buried his face in my chest. His whole body shook with sobs. The bathroom. He did. He told me. He managed between gasps. My blood turned to ice. I held him tight and waited for him to calm down enough to explain. During recess, Ethan had gone to use the bathroom, and it was Vic who followed him in and locked the main door. Ethan was at the urinal when Vic approached from behind. "Let me help you with that zipper," he said, reaching toward my son. Ethan said he felt his hands going travel underneath down there, and that's when Mr. Doyle burst through the door. Ethan said he'd never heard that voice from his quiet teacher before. "Vic, get out, now." Vic tried to play it off saying he was just cleaning, but Mr. Doyle positioned himself between them and didn't move until Vic left. He walked Ethan back to class and told him he did nothing wrong and that he was brave. But here's what made my stomach drop. Ethan said after school when he was heading to the bus, Mr. Doyle pulled him aside near the playground. He knelt down to Ethan's level and spoke very quietly. "What happened today you should only tell your parents, okay? Not your principal, not other teachers, just your parents. Can you promise me that?" Ethan was confused why it had to be a secret. That's when I realized Mr. Doyle was scared of something, or someone. Principal Harrison called me that evening saying there had been an incident where Mr. Doyle had overreacted to Vic doing routine cleaning. She suggested Mr. Doyle was becoming paranoid and seeing threats everywhere. Maybe it would be best if Ethan transferred to another class after all. That's when I knew something really wasn't right. I emailed Mr. Doyle that night asking to meet because I needed answers. The next morning at 6 a.m. we sat in his empty classroom. He looked exhausted and defeated. "My son told me you said not to tell anyone," I said. "I'm so thankful he didn't. And now because this happened again, I can show you." He then opened his desk drawer with a key, and what I saw made my blood run cold. He pulled out a folder and spread photos across his desk. Pictures of Vic entering classrooms at night. He told me that 3 months ago he found children's undies in Vic's supply closet. I wanted to throw up there and then. I documented everything. Times he entered rooms after hours. Items missing from children's cubbies. What happened? I took everything to Principal Harrison. She said she'd investigate immediately. His voice then cracked. 2 days later, I was suspended for inappropriate touching. The evidence I gave her vanished. He then looked up at me with hollow eyes. That's when I found something else. Vic and Harrison are siblings. Full story on channel, linked below. I stared at the photos spread across Mr. Doyle's desk, my hands trembling as I picked up one showing Vic's van in the school parking lot at 2 a.m. The timestamp glowed in the corner like an accusation. Another photo showed him entering my son's classroom, his silhouette unmistakable against the hallway lights. "He has a key to every classroom," Mr. Doyle said quietly. "Harrison gave it to him after my investigation. Said it was for extra security monitoring." My stomach churned as I studied a photo of Vic standing over empty desks in Ethan's room, his hand resting on one of the small chairs. The clock on the wall showed 2:47 a.m. "There's something else you need to know." Mr. Doyle glanced toward the door, then leaned closer. "Harrison monitors all parent emails through the school server. She has admin access to everything. That's why I asked to meet in person." I gathered the photos with shaking hands, shoving them into my purse. Outside, car doors slammed as other parents began arriving for morning drop-off. Through the window, I spotted several who'd stood with Vic at yesterday's pickup, nodding along as he ranted about Mr. Doyle. "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. "Thank you for showing me this." Mr. Doyle grabbed my wrist gently. "Be careful. They've done this before." I rushed through the empty hallways, my footsteps echoing off the walls. In the parking lot, I froze. Vic's van sat in its usual spot, positioned perfectly to see everyone entering the building. He was already there, earlier than the 7:30 drop-off, just like every morning. As I fumbled for my keys, Vic emerged from his van holding a steaming coffee cup. He waved cheerfully, that same friendly smile he wore while telling parents about the predator teaching their children. My skin crawled. I drove home with white knuckles gripping the wheel, calling my husband at his office. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "I need to tell you what happened with Ethan yesterday," I said, words tumbling out about the bathroom, about Vic, about what Mr. Doyle showed me. "Honey, slow down. You're overreacting to school drama again." His voice carried that familiar dismissive tone. "Vic's a good guy. Remember when he fixed our garage door last month while you were at your sister's?" My blood ran cold. "He was in our house? Just the garage? Look, I have a meeting. We'll talk tonight." "Wait," I said desperately. "There's more. Principal Harrison is his—" "Did you forget Vic offered to be a character witness during our custody evaluation last year, when things were rough? He didn't have to do that." The line went dead. I sat in my driveway, processing this new information. Vic had been positioning himself in our lives for over a year. Inside, I found Ethan at the kitchen table, mechanically eating cereal. When I reached for the box to pour myself some, he flinched. The same sharp defensive movement I'd seen when Vic reached toward him. "Honey, let me see your arms," I said gently. He hesitated, then rolled up his sleeves. Fresh bruises circled both wrists, purple fingerprints I hadn't noticed yesterday in his emotional state. "Is Mr. Doyle in trouble for telling?" Ethan asked quietly. "I don't want him to get in trouble because of me." "No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. Neither did Mr. Doyle." I drove to the police station, Ethan safe at home with cartoons and locked doors. The desk sergeant looked up from his paperwork with mild interest. "I need to report an attempted child inappropriate touching at Riverside Elementary," I said. His expression shifted. "Do you have evidence of physical contact?" I explained everything, watching his face grow more skeptical with each word. When I mentioned Vic's name, he actually smiled. "Ma'am, Vic Morrison's been keeping that school safe for 15 years. My daughter's in Principal Harrison's honor roll program. Are you sure there hasn't been some misunderstanding? My son has bruises." The teacher witnessed. "A teacher currently under investigation for the same thing you're accusing Vic of." He leaned back in his chair. "Look, without physical evidence, documented injuries, or multiple witnesses, this is hearsay. hearsay. And frankly, you might want to be careful about defamation. Vic's got standing in this community. I left the station feeling hollow. In the parking lot, I called Mr. Doyle's cell. It rang once before going to voicemail. I texted quickly, went to police. Please stay safe. My phone buzzed immediately. They know you were here. Another text followed. Harrison called emergency staff meeting. I'm being terminated. A school district van cruised slowly past the police station, the driver's face obscured by tinted windows. I got in my car and drove home, checking my mirrors obsessively. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Principal Harrison's name appeared on the screen. I heard about your concerning accusations this morning, she said without preamble. I think we should meet to discuss your son's well-being. I don't think that's... I've already reached out to your ex-husband about the situation. He's very concerned about these disturbing fantasies you're projecting onto school staff. My mouth went dry. You called my ex? Of course. Both parents need to be informed when there are questions about a child's safety. Unstable behavior from a custodial parent is something we take very seriously. Her voice dripped false concern. I do hope you'll get the help you need, for Ethan's sake. The threat was clear. I hung up without responding. In my home office, I remembered something. Yesterday, when Ethan was crying and telling me about the bathroom, I'd been holding my phone. I opened the recording app I used for work meetings. There it was, 47 minutes of audio from yesterday afternoon. I fast-forwarded through Ethan's sobs, my comforting words, until I found it. Background noise from the pickup line, captured through our open window. Vic's voice, distant but clear. Such pretty boys this year. Such pretty boys. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stop now or everyone will know what kind of mother lets this happen. I stared at the message, then at the audio file. Evidence. Finally, something concrete. But Harrison's threat echoed in my mind. She'd already called my ex. Already started spinning her narrative. I thought about the custody evaluation last year. How close I'd come to losing Ethan during the worst of the divorce. How Vic had offered to vouch for me. The friendly janitor who knew all the kids. My hands shook as I backed up the audio file to 3 different cloud services. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't let this evidence disappear like Mr. Doyle's had. But I knew Harrison was right about one thing. This was about to get much worse before it got better. And Ethan would be caught in the middle of all of it. I rushed to the pediatrician's office that afternoon, my hands still trembling from Harrison's call. The waiting room felt suffocating with its cheerful murals and scattered toys. When Dr. Martinez finally examined Ethan, her expression grew increasingly grave as she documented the bruising patterns on his wrists. These are consistent with forceful gripping, she said carefully, photographing each mark. I'll need to file a report, but legally speaking, without witnessing the incident directly, it's considered inconclusive for prosecution purposes. My heart sank. The nurse who entered to assist glanced at me with an odd expression. You know, my sister works in medical records here. She mentioned Vic's wife just started in that department last month. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Even here, in what should have been a safe space, their reach extended. Dr. Martinez noticed my reaction and suggested, you seem very anxious about all this. I could recommend someone to talk to, help you process these concerns. I declined politely, but her words stung. Already my legitimate fears were being reframed as anxiety, paranoia. Outside in the parking garage, I spotted a familiar car 3 spaces down, my ex-husband's silver sedan, which should have been at his downtown office. Through the hospital's glass doors, I watched him enter the building with Principal Harrison and another woman carrying a briefcase marked with the CPS logo. My phone vibrated. A text from him. We need to discuss your recent behavior. You're scaring our son with these wild accusations. I'm taking necessary steps to protect him. The word protect made me feel sick. I knew what those necessary steps meant. Emergency custody modifications could happen within 48 hours if child endangerment was claimed. The system designed to protect children could be weaponized against the very parents trying to save them. I drove to my best friend Sarah's house, desperate for somewhere safe to leave Ethan while I figured out my next move. Sarah answered the door looking uncomfortable, but she agreed to watch him for a few hours. As Ethan ran off to play with her daughter, Sarah pulled me aside. Listen, I should tell you something. Vic's daughter is in Emma's dance class. He volunteers there sometimes, helps with costume changes during recitals. My stomach lurched. Sarah, you need to... Principal Harrison called all the class parents this morning, she interrupted. She's concerned about your... Well, she used the word breakdown. Said you're making dangerous accusations without evidence. The net was tightening. Every move I made to protect Ethan was being twisted into evidence of instability. I left him with Sarah despite my growing unease and drove to my lawyer's office. The downtown building felt like a sanctuary until I entered the reception area. Mrs. Thompson will see you shortly, the assistant said, then added quietly, my son had Mr. Doyle last year. Something always felt off about that man. Even here, the narrative had taken hold. When I finally sat across from my lawyer, her words confirmed my worst fears. Emergency custody hearings can be expedited within 48 hours if there's a claim of child endangerment, she explained. Your ex-husband's petition claims you're having paranoid delusions, making false accusations that could harm Ethan psychologically. But I have evidence. Evidence of what? A teacher already under suspicion showing you photos? An accidental recording of ambiguous statements? These accusations against a respected school employee could actually be seen as deflection, especially given your contentious custody history. I left her office feeling more trapped than ever. In the grocery store parking lot, I was loading bags into my trunk when a shadow fell across me. Vic stood there, his custodial uniform replaced by jeans and a polo shirt, his expression aggressively friendly. Heard you've been having a rough time, he said, moving closer than necessary. Ethan okay? Poor kid had such a tough day yesterday. My hand instinctively moved to my purse where I'd tucked the photos. Vic's eyes tracked the movement. You know, I'll be checking on him personally, he continued, his tone light but eyes cold. Make sure he's doing all right. That's what we do in this community. Look out for each other's kids. I noticed his van parked nearby, its back doors open. Inside, I could see boxes labeled with different classroom numbers. My skin crawled as I realized he had access to every child in that school, every day, with complete authority and trust. I need to go, I managed, fumbling with my keys. Of course, give Ethan my best. Tell him Mr. Vic is always watching out for him. I drove home with my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. In my driveway sat an unexpected sight, Mr. Doyle's hit-up Honda. He emerged as I parked, looking even more haggard than this morning. His hands shook as he pressed a flash drive into my palm. They fired me an hour ago, he said quickly, effective immediately. But I saved everything first. There's more you need to know. He glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. Check your attic. I know it sounds crazy, but Vic's been in your house. The garage repair. He had access to your whole home. Before I could respond, he was back in his car. As he drove away, I noticed my neighbors openly staring from their windows. One one of them holding up a phone, recording, documenting the fired teacher visiting the unstable mother. Inside, I climbed the pull-down ladder to our attic, my heart pounding. Among the Christmas decorations and old baby clothes, I found items that shouldn't have been there. Ethan's missing swim trunks from last summer, a school shirt I thought we'd lost, and most disturbing, a notebook I'd never seen before. The notebook contained children's names in neat handwriting. Stars marked certain entries. Ethan's name had 3 stars. The Martinez boy who'd moved away, 4 stars. 6 other names I recognized from school, all with various star ratings. The garage door rumbled open below. My husband's car, home hours early. I quickly photographed the notebook pages and tucked it into my waistband, making it down the ladder just as he entered the kitchen. "We need to talk," he said, his expression cold, "about this insanity you're perpetrating." "David, please, I found—" "Stop." He held up a hand. "Principal Harrison showed me documentation. Your erratic behavior over the past weeks. The scenes you've caused. The trauma you're inflicting on our son with these sick fantasies. They're not fantasies. Vic has been helping me document your instability for weeks now. Every paranoid accusation, every manic episode. He's been nothing but supportive during your decline. The betrayal hit me physically. My own husband, weaponized against me by the very predator threatening our son. You have until tonight," he continued. "Drop this insanity, apologize to the school, get psychiatric help, or I'll support the emergency custody transfer. Ethan deserves better than a mother who's losing her grip on reality." I stared at him, this man I'd once loved, now completely under their influence. The notebook pressed against my back felt like evidence and a death sentence simultaneously. Every move I made to save Ethan pushed him further into danger. That evening, I drove to Sarah's house to retrieve Ethan. The front door was ajar, voices carrying from inside. I pushed it open to find Vic in the living room, toolbox at his feet. Sarah looking flustered. "Just fixing a leak," Vic said cheerfully. "Can't have water damage in a house with kids." His toolbox sat strategically near the stairs, blocking the path. Ethan was visible at the top landing, his small face pale and frightened. He wouldn't come down while Vic was there. "Some parents," Vic said loudly to Sarah, "create drama to cover their own neglect. Projection, they call it. Sad, really." I moved past him, forcing myself between his bulk and the stairs. "Ethan, come on, sweetie. Time to go." Ethan flew down the stairs and pressed against me. As we reached the door, he whispered something that made my blood freeze. He was in the bathroom with me again. Outside, Vic followed us, his phone already out and recording. "Look at her dragging that poor child around in her delusional state," he announced to the gathering neighbors. "Unstable. I'm calling CPS for this child's safety." I buckled Ethan into the car as quickly as possible, aware of every watching eye, every recording phone. We drove aimlessly until I found a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. In a back booth, I finally examined the flash drive Mr. Doyle had given me. The audio files were damning. Conversations between Harrison and Vic, discussing problem parents and how to handle them. One recording made my hands shake. Harrison's voice clear and cold. "We handled the Martinez family the same way. They won't be talking to anyone." Another file dated last year. "The Doyle situation is contained. The suspension will stick. Parents believe what we tell them to believe." Ethan sat beside me, exhausted and scared, sipping chocolate milk with shaking hands. I realized with growing horror that we weren't their first victims. This was a practice system, refined over years. Blue and red lights flashed through the diner windows. 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot. Through the window, I could see Vic's van parked across the street. He'd called in a concerned citizen report about a disturbed woman with a child. The officers entered, their expressions professionally neutral. "Ma'am, we've received multiple calls about your welfare and your son's. We'd like you to come to the station voluntarily, or we'll need to involve Child Protective Services directly." The trap was complete. Go voluntarily and seem cooperative but guilty, or resist and confirm their narrative of instability. Either way, Ethan would be taken from me. At the police station, the nightmare accelerated. The CPS worker who arrived wore a badge showing she was a graduate of Harrison's leadership program. My ex-husband was already there, Principal Harrison beside him as support. They presented a timeline of my escalating delusions over the past 48 hours, complete with witness statements and documentation. "She's been traumatizing our son with these fantasies," my ex-husband said, his performance convincing. "Dragging him around town, making wild accusations against respected community members." My lawyer arrived but pulled me aside immediately. "The evidence against you is overwhelming. Multiple witnesses to erratic behavior, documentation of unfounded accusations. The judge assigned to the emergency hearing tomorrow. She's Harrison's cousin." I felt the walls closing in. Every person who should have protected us was either compromised or complicit. In the supervised visitation room, I got 5 minutes with Ethan before he would be transferred to his father. As I hugged him, he pressed something into my hand. "A small key. From Mr. Doyle's desk," he whispered. "He said you might need it." Through the observation window, I watched Vic enter as the school representative to comfort Ethan during the transfer. My son's small body went rigid with fear, but no one else seemed to notice. Or they chose not to. Outside, I discovered my car had been towed for improper parking. I stood in the police station parking lot, watching my ex-husband's car pull away with Ethan in the back seat, Vic's van following close behind. The security camera I'd noticed earlier was spray-painted black. My phone buzzed. Harrison's number. "Emergency hearing tomorrow at 8 a.m. Don't be late. Oh, and that recording you think you have? You might want to check those files again." I opened the audio app. Every file was corrupted, showing 0 bytes. Somehow, they'd gotten to my phone, my evidence. But the key Ethan had given me felt solid in my palm. Whatever it opened, Mr. Doyle had risked everything to make sure I got it. I used the last of my cash for a cheap motel room, my mind racing through options that grew fewer by the hour. The key looked like a simple motel key, numbered 237. I tried it on my door. No match. But there was a motel 2 blocks over, older, the kind that still used actual keys instead of cards. Room 237 opened to reveal Mr. Doyle's insurance policy, boxes of evidence, physical documents, photos, and most crucially, a written statement from another child, a boy named Timothy Martinez, whose family had moved away suddenly last year. His description matched Ethan's exactly. The bathroom approach, the wrist bruises, but with one horrifying addition. He named both Vic and Harrison as present during one incident. A sticky note on top in Mr. Doyle's handwriting. "They made his family disappear. You're next, unless you run." But I couldn't run, not without Ethan. I called the Martinez family using a number from the evidence. The father answered on the second ring, his voice tense with recognition. "Stop digging," he said immediately. "They'll destroy you like they tried to destroy us. Your son took settlement money to stay quiet and move. It was that or lose him entirely. They had leverage on everyone. Harrison keeps files on every family in that school. Mistakes, secrets, anything useful. But if we worked together, there is no together. There's survival. Take their deal when they offer it. It's the only way to keep your child." He hung up. I sat on the motel bed, surrounded by evidence violence that would never see a courtroom. The system designed to protect children had been weaponized by the very predators it should stop. And tomorrow, I would face a judge who was family to my son's abuser. Dawn came too quickly. I dressed carefully for court, knowing appearance mattered when fighting accusations of instability. The courthouse lobby was packed with parents from school, all wearing buttons supporting safe schools, and holding signs about protecting children from unstable influences. Vic stood among them, wearing a volunteer badge, accepting hugs and handshakes from people who had no idea what he was. In the bathroom, I cornered a woman whose child's name had stars in Vic's notebook. She broke down when I mentioned the bruises, showing me her own child's wrists, the same pattern as Ethan's. I know, she whispered, but Vic has something on my husband. An affair. Harrison has photos. If we speak up, we lose everything. She fled when Harrison entered the bathroom, her presence alone enough to terrify a grown woman into silence. The courtroom felt like a theater where everyone knew their roles except me. The judge reviewed the evidence of my erratic behavior, police reports, witness statements, my harassment of school staff. My ex-husband testified about my obsession with Mr. Doyle, implying an inappropriate relationship that explained my vendetta against Vic. During recess, my lawyer abandoned me entirely. Harrison had shown him something on her phone, a photo from a hotel, him with someone who wasn't his wife. I can't help you, he muttered, gathering his files. Find someone else. I stood alone as the judge made his ruling. The flash drive evidence was inadmissible. No chain of custody could be fabricated. The testimony of a terminated teacher held no weight. The pattern of bruises was inconclusive, without direct witness to their cause. I'm granting temporary full custody to the father, the judge announced. The mother's visitation rights are suspended pending a full psychological evaluation. The child's safety must be our primary concern. On the courthouse steps, I watched them load Ethan into my ex-husband's car, my son's face pressed against the window, mouthing "help me" as they drove away. I noticed with growing horror that Vic now had a key on his keychain that matched my ex-husband's house key. Harrison approached me with practiced sympathy. This must be so difficult. I hope you'll get the help you need. My brother-in-law is an excellent therapist. I could make a referral. The trap was complete. Every avenue of help led back to them. Every system meant to protect had been corrupted, and my son was now in the hands of his abuser, with no one to believe the truth. But I still had the evidence from room 237, physical proof that couldn't be corrupted or deleted. The Martinez boy statement, the photos, the documentation of a pattern spanning years. I might have lost this battle, but I wouldn't abandon Ethan. As I walked to the public library, banned from my own home, labeled unstable by my community, I thought about Mr. Doyle's words. They've done this before. They had, but they'd never faced a mother with nothing left to lose. The public library's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I hunched over the ancient computer terminal. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for anything about Harrison's past. The screen loaded slowly, revealing an archived news article from 8 years ago. Administrative restructuring at Westfield Elementary following student welfare concerns. The story had been retracted within days, but the cached version remained. My pulse quickened. The librarian approached, her sensible shoes clicking on the linoleum. She leaned close, whispering that I'd been banned from all public spaces where children gathered. Court order, effective immediately. I gathered my notes and fled to the parking lot, where Mr. Doyle waited behind my car, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He shoved a photo into my hands. Vic had taken it last night, Ethan asleep in an unfamiliar bed, his small form curled defensively. Mr. Doyle's voice cracked as he relayed Vic's message. I had 24 hours to disappear, or Ethan would have an accident. The threat hung between us like poison. My phone rang. Martinez's number. His voice was urgent when I answered. His son had attempted sewer slide last week and finally told the truth about what happened at our school. He was flying back with medical records, documentation of the same wrist bruising patterns, but Harrison had threatened to have his wife deported if they testified. The system's tentacles reached everywhere. I drove past my former home, watching from the street as Vic's van pulled into the driveway. My ex-husband's car was gone. He'd be at work for hours. Ethan was homesick from school, alone with a predator who now had a key. I watched Vic disable the security camera before entering. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. A text from David. Vic says you're stalking our house. Restraining order filed. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Call 911 and face arrest for violating a restraining order I'd just learned about, or watch my son disappear into that house with his abuser. Through the window, I saw Vic moving through the hallway toward Ethan's room. I abandoned the car and ran through my former neighbor's yard, their dog barking frantically. The back door's spare key was still hidden where I'd left it months ago. I burst through just as Vic reached Ethan's doorway. My son's terrified voice carried down the hall. The confrontation was violent and chaotic. I grabbed a kitchen knife, placing myself between Vic and my son. Vic's pockets spilled as we struggled. Keys to at least a dozen houses scattered across the floor. He screamed about the crazy woman attacking him while doing his job. Ethan clung to my leg, his shirt torn, sobbing uncontrollably. Police sirens wailed closer. Vic smiled coldly, knowing how this would look. The same sergeant from before entered first, his hand already on his weapon, but his expression shifted when he saw Ethan's torn clothing, the defensive wounds on my arms, the collection of house keys that couldn't possibly belong to one janitor. As they cuffed me, Ethan broke. The words poured out of him in a torrent. What Vic did, when it happened, how Mr. Doyle saved him. He pointed to his stuffed bear on the shelf, the nanny cam we'd installed during the divorce, forgotten by everyone but him. My ex-husband arrived as Ethan was mid-sentence, his face cycling through confusion, denial, and finally, horror. The sergeant's radio crackled. More units were needed. Harrison had arrived at the school in a panic, trying to destroy documents. 3 more families had called 911 after word spread of Vic's arrest. The carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing. They uncuffed me in the back of the police car as my ex-husband emerged from the house with the nanny cam footage. His hands shook as he demanded Vic's immediate arrest. The footage was time-stamped, impossible to dispute. Vic's attempts to claim I'd planted evidence fell apart when Ethan's detailed testimony aligned perfectly with the video. At the police station, Martinez arrived with his son and a folder of medical documentation. The boy, pale and thin, identified Vic to the detective. When he mentioned Aunt Principal helping Uncle Vic, the detective's expression hardened. The family connection they'd hidden so carefully was exposed. More families arrived throughout the day. The boy whose name had 4 stars. The girl with 3. Parents who'd been too terrified to speak, freed by the first crack in the wall. The detective revealed that calls had been flooding in since news of Vic's arrest spread through the school community. Harrison arrived with her lawyer, still trying to control the narrative. She claimed I'd orchestrated a witch hunt against innocent siblings, but her carefully maintained facade cracked when police found the evidence room at her home, files on every family in the district district, leverage gathered over years. Mr. Doyle arrived at the district attorney's office with boxes of documentation he'd been hiding for months. Every incident, every complaint that had been buried, every family that had been silenced. The DA mentioned that federal authorities were now interested, given Harrison's pattern across multiple districts. I held Ethan through his forensic exam at the hospital, his small hand gripping mine as nurses documented evidence. He was brave but broken, flinching at unexpected movements. The nurse mentioned quietly that 2 other children from school were scheduled for exams that afternoon. In the hospital corridor, my ex-husband broke down completely. The weight of what he'd enabled, how Harrison had manipulated his custody grab, crashed over him. He signed papers agreeing to supervised visitation only, understanding finally what his blind trust had cost our son. Local news crews gathered outside as word spread. Parents who'd supported Vic stood in shocked clusters as police read a statement. Several recognized their children's initials on the evidence list. One mother confronted me, furious that I hadn't tried harder to warn them. The misdirected anger was easier than facing their own blindness. 3 weeks later, I sat at my sister's kitchen table helping Ethan with homework. His therapy sessions were helping, though recovery would take years, not weeks. The news played in the background. Harrison and Vic both denied bail, facing federal charges now that the full scope was emerging. Mr. Doyle's teaching license had been reinstated. He'd sent a card thanking me for believing him when no one else would. The school district was under federal oversight, implementing new protection protocols. Ethan looked up from his math worksheet. Mom, I'm glad you believed me. I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling his heartbeat against mine. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw another parent from school, her face drawn with worry. Her daughter had just disclosed something. The fight wasn't over. It never really would be. But Ethan was safe, the truth was known, and other children might be spared because we'd refused to stay silent. I opened the door.